Nothing is more evident than that modern capitalism is just as subversive as Marxism. The materialistic view of life on which both systems are based is identical. Both of their ideals are quantitatively identical, including the premises connected to a world the center of which is constituted of technology, science, production, productivity, and consumption. And as long as we talk about economic classes, profit, salaries, and production, and as long as we believe that real human progress is determined by a particular system of distribution of wealth and goods, and that, generally speaking, human progress is measured by the degree of wealth of indigence, then we are not even close to what is essential. Julius Evola. Not bad. Not bad. Obviously, materialism is something that is pretty disputed. It's pretty disputed when it comes to, well, I would think it's pretty disputed when it comes to religion the most. Outside of that, outside of anything spiritual or religious, it doesn't really come up. And you'll notice it doesn't really come up when it comes to politics at all. And this is why I once again harp on politics doesn't understand religion, because politics is based on materialism. It has to be based on materialism. If it isn't, then there's no sense of dictating that moral basis on materialism. It dictates and predicates itself almost entirely on materialism. There is no, when it comes to morality, it's like a second or third hand, maybe even fourth or fifth hand concern. I mean, you can even look at as complicated of an issue as a pro-life, pro-choice stance. Yes, I mean, part of that is a moral argument, but the other part of it is a material and economic argument. Somebody's not wealthy enough to support, have a family, or have children, then that is an easy route to take. That's a get-out-of-jail-free card. Personal feelings aside, that is something that, well, let's see, who profits off of it? Well, there's taxes that are involved, so almost every citizen pays for it. Private citizen, that is. Funds it. The insurance companies, the medical industry, and the constant market supply, if you want to call it that, or commodities, if that's how you want to see it as, are supplying that whole thing. So it's just an issue. It's an issue of supply and demand. So take the morality out of it, and now you will have people's true intentions behind it as to who is profit and loss off of that. So, I mean, I disagree that modern capitalism is just as subversive as Marxism, but there is definitely you could definitely make arguments for both being subversive modes of dialectical teachings or things of that nature. Anyway, the materialistic view of life, yes. Yes. That's so true, especially in the West. Oof. Now I guess I'll inject some personality or some personal outlook into it. That the Western traditions of Christianity see the commandments or the rules in the Bible as, oh, if I do this, this, and this, it's a check mark. It's a checklist, so I can go now, so I can go to heaven, or I'm good. I'm good. Yep, I can do it. Whereas in the Eastern sense, it is holistic. It's more than just commandments. It's more than just something to strive for. Obviously, we're all going to fall short. Once again, we won't blame anybody for being perfect or, having a desire to not want it, whether it be from the West or the East. I think everybody's worthy at least of that. And everybody who strives for it too. It doesn't matter. Religion or outlook just depends on, how you try to go about doing it too. There's different ways to go around it too. But yeah, I don't agree that both systems are identical to each other, because that's not true. That's not true. They're not identical at all. In fact, Marxism is definitely outclassed and outpaced by capitalism. But there is a sense of them being based around the same thing as far as centralization and the effect that they have on human progress. There's that. It could be good or bad. Let's see. The premise, including the premises connected to a world center of which is constituted of technology, science, production, productivity, and consumption. So that's the cycle right there. The productivity and consumption part. That's a constant dynamic cycle. That's a constant cycle where our culture has been completely consumed by just products. There's, the American flag, hot dogs, hamburgers, 4th of July, American football, basketball, baseball, maybe even hockey to an extent. No, I don't know. NASCAR, just to name a few. But outside of the American flag, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, those are all just, the rest you can do, there's just branding to everything. It's just brands. It's just like it's a numbers game. How productive can they become to consume what they need? So with that, I guess we're just as vapid as a communist or a Marxist regime could be. Socialist or communist, take your pick. But we don't have the old traditions as a traditionalist like Evola likes to strive for, likes to set an example. So, progress in the traditionalist sense is having a culture, is having a wealth of a culture. Like there's, and I'm not talking about wealth in the term of money sense. I'm talking about it in the sense of there is a vibrancy, there is a culture that is something to be proud of, something to be, something that has value, both intrinsically and extrinsically. And as long as we only talk about economic classes, profit, salaries, and productions, and as long as we believe that real human progress is determined by particular system of distribution of wealth and goods, and that, generally speaking, human progress is measured by the degree of wealth or indigence, then we are not even close to what is essential. Yeah, empty, vapid. It's like being a robot going through the motions. Oh, you get richer, but what do you have to be grateful for? What do you have to be thankful for? Who got you there? You know, is there any reason to do it besides your own pocketbook? I mean, sure, there's plenty of reasons to do it. There's plenty of motivations to be motivated to do it. And this is where I disagree with him on the first part. It's more evident to do that in a capitalistic society than it would be in a Marxist society, because at least in capitalism, you're rewarded, and you can maybe agree, disagree with how that goes, but in a capitalistic society, there's at least a sense of ownership versus a Marxist one where they don't really make any arguments for it whatsoever, and it doesn't go down that road. It's different. It's a centralized, more centralized, less privately owned dialectic. So, and then measuring that human progress by a degree of wealth. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you can't mark human progress by the money in people's bank accounts, the money and power that people supposedly have over each other. You can't just do that, because the greedier that people become, the more power hungry they become. And I said this in a previous video, but capitalism makes those people who are in power and who want to be greedier have less of a stranglehold on the subversion that could come from it, subverting people, subverting products, subverting things like that. However, I mean, there's a couple rabbit holes that you could jump down if you want to make the case for subversive capitalism, and I know what they are, but that's not the point. Anyway, where the overt nature of Marxism hurts, hurts everybody, and those at the top are the ones that are collecting. Those are the ones that are just, taking it wholesale and hurting everybody and everything. For instance, Stalin's gulags. I mean, it's a perfect example. It's an absolute perfect example of how the whole thing can go completely awry. It can go completely out of control. It's one of those things where he held the power. His power was so centralized that all those around him, he killed everybody. He didn't trust anybody. He killed everybody, and he was in power. I mean, how much more corrupt could you can't get any more corrupt. I mean, it's awful. But it went from subversive to completely overt. And if anybody were to question it, then they were immediately sent to the gulag. Even people who knew they were innocent had to go. And even the people that accusing them that knew they were innocent had to go. And then the people that probably accused them turned around and probably were accused and then sent. I mean, it was just a vicious cycle of corruption and death, and that is truth for the progress not being made, because when you have that finger pointing, that's all it turns itself into. Now, could there be arguments being made today that that's happening? Certainly. In plenty of ways. Has it changed itself to a more technocratic theme? Yes. Yes, there is. Because everything's so controlled through technology now that it's not even funny. But to have what was qualified as progress under a reign, somebody such as Stalin, forget it. I mean, there was no progress being made. There was zero progress being made. And now for capitalism, you can definitely make a case, and I'm not talking about the kind of liberal progressivism that you might think that there's progress being made today. No, I'm thinking of more of like a JFK kind of progressivism, more of a civil rights kind of progressivism. A more conservative, holistic view on liberalism. But take that out of it, and what you have today could be classified as cultural Marxism, as what might be qualified as the left. However, there is parts of it that are on the conservative side too. So I'm not taking anything away from that. Yet, the capitalism still, a want for capitalism, a wanting of freedom, an honoring of what is in the transcendent documents like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence exists on the conservative side. It doesn't exist on the left. Oh, well, I should say it only exists when they want it to. But the subversion is played out on both parts. So, I mean, that's just it, where it can be just as tyrannically overt as a Stalinist Russia, or something as subversive as cultural Marxism. However, do I think capitalism brings it around? You would have to get different viewpoints to look at to make a more cogent argument out of that in a traditionalist sense for what could be defined as any kind of true progress or any kind of significant progress being made, and it not being completely dictated to consumerism or a culture of emptiness, which it's there. Then yeah, you really have to break that down, and you have to make sense of it out of head or tails. You have to make sense of it. You have to make sense out of it. Because if you don't, then there's a lot of more rabbit holes that could pop up that you could pretty much easily be led astray. So with that is a breakdown of that quote. And that's it.